In 2018, in the arid and sun-baked lands of Mesopotamia, archaeologists conducting excavations stumbled upon a long-forgotten secret among the ruins of Babylon. Amid the sand-covered remnants of ancient palaces, they discovered a heavy stone-sealed chest. Inside lay clay tablets that did not record the city's political or economic life, but instead revealed the dark and perverse desires of a king whose actions had been buried and forgotten for centuries. The tablets detailed events within the palace, religious rituals, and the daily life of the people. Each line revealed the king's passions and the intricate workings of palace life. As the archaeologists deciphered the inscriptions, the grand yet decayed world of Babylon gradually unfolded before their eyes. In his youth, the king had been a hero in the eyes of his people. He won great victories in battle, defended the city from enemies, and adorned temples with gold. The people loved him, and the priests regarded him as a figure close to the gods. Yet, as he became more isolated within the palace walls, his ambitions and desires grew. He became not just a ruler, but a prisoner of his own dark passions. The tablets described in detail the celebrations and religious ceremonies held in the palace. At first, these gatherings were festivals for the people and offerings to the gods. Over time, however, the king transformed them into perverse rituals to satisfy his own desires. Even the priests hesitated to approach him, for his words and gaze no longer reflected human authority, but the reflection of greed and twisted cravings. One tablet recounted a night in the most sacred chambers of the palace. The king forcibly brought one of his own bloodline into the room. This was not merely an act of union, but a ritual of defiance against the gods and a display of his supposed power. The palace was shrouded in silence. Slaves and attendants later wrote that they felt the weight of that silence for days. The sounds from within, whether screams, silent pleas, or something else, could not be forgotten. Another tablet included the testimony of a palace guard. That night, no one was allowed near the king's chambers, and the sounds emerging inside lingered in the ears of those who heard them for days. The story quickly spread among the people. From marketplaces to temple courtyards, everyone whispered, "The peace of the city is broken. The gods are angry." The discovery of further tablets revealed how the king's actions rippled through Babylon. Priests described unusual signs in the sky: red moons, sudden storms, and the trembling of the earth. To them, these were warnings from the gods, a punishment for what had taken place within the palace walls. Ordinary people, too, began to fear that their ruler had crossed a forbidden boundary. Merchants in the bustling bazaars noted that trade slowed, as caravans hesitated to enter the city. Farmers outside the walls claimed their harvests failed more often, blaming the wrath of the heavens. The air of Babylon, once filled with the scent of incense and lively music, now carried whispers of dread. The once celebrated king was slowly becoming a figure of fear, not respect. The tablets painted the king not only as a man consumed by lust, but also as one who lost himself in paranoia. He trusted no one. Guards rotated endlessly, food was tested for poison, and courtiers were punished at the slightest sign of hesitation. The palace became a cage of suspicion, where even loyal servants trembled in his presence. One haunting account described how the king, during a lavish banquet, suddenly demanded silence. He spoke of visions that came to him at night, shadowy figures moving through his chambers, whispering words he could not understand. He believed the gods themselves had turned against him, sending omens to remind him of his sins. The people outside the palace saw his decline reflected in the city itself. Temples began to crumble, their once bright flames barely flickering. Statues of gods were covered in dust, neglected as priests lost faith in the king's rule. Markets were empty, and travelers who once admired the glory of Babylon now left with tales of sorrow and corruption. What frightened the people most was the silence of the royal family. No wife, no son, no daughter dared to speak against him. Those who tried were said to vanish within the palace, never to be seen again. The tablets did not say where they went, but broken fragments hinted at secret chambers below the palace floor, rooms where screams were heard, then silenced forever. As the translations continued, archaeologists realized the story was not only about a single man but about the slow collapse of an empire from within. The king's private sins had grown into public consequences. Babylon, once the jewel of Mesopotamia, was now described as a city under a curse. One particularly detailed tablet recorded the testimony of a temple scribe. He wrote that during a great festival, when thousands gathered to honor the gods, the king appeared on the steps of the ziggurat. Instead of offering prayers, he spoke only of himself, his victories, his desires, his supposed divine right. The crowd was silent, their eyes filled not with admiration but with unease. The priests, normally standing proudly beside him, lowered their heads, unable to meet the gaze of their ruler. It was during this same festival, the scribe wrote, that a sudden wind swept through the city, torches were extinguished, banners tore from their poles, and the crowd scattered in fear. Too many. This was no accident of weather, but a sign that the gods had abandoned their king. The city, once united in worship, now trembled under doubt. The tablets also spoke of nights filled with blood and fire. Rebellions broke out in the streets. Citizens who once cheered the king now painted curses on the palace walls. Soldiers, sworn to defend him, deserted their posts. Babylon was becoming a battlefield, its mighty walls echoing with screams instead of celebrations. Amid this chaos, the king retreated deeper into the palace. He surrounded himself with fewer and fewer people, relying only on slaves and guards who feared him more than they respected him. Food supplies dwindled, yet feasts continued in the palace halls while the people starved outside. Clay fragments describe these feasts in chilling detail, tables overflowing with meat and wine, while the king laughed alone, speaking to shadows as though they were his closest advisors. But even within the palace, the atmosphere was poisoned. Servants wrote of hearing cries in the night, echoing from hidden chambers below. Some claimed the king had turned those he mistrusted into sacrifices, offering their lives in desperate rituals to win back the favor of the gods. None of these rituals seemed to bring him peace, grew, and with it, the suffering of Babylon. The later tablets revealed the king's final descent into darkness. No longer able to trust his generals or priests, he turned to secret rites that blended fragments of old Babylonian faith with twisted inventions of his own. Within the deepest chambers of the palace, he ordered torches extinguished and walls painted black, so that he might speak to shadows without distraction. One fragment described how he gathered his remaining servants and commanded them to chant hymns backward, believing it would force the gods to listen. Another told of how he drenched altars in wine and blood, mixing offerings in ways that horrified even hardened soldiers. To him, these rituals were the only way to silence the whispers that tormented his mind each night. Outside the palace, Babylon was unraveling. Trade routes collapsed, temples stood empty, and whole districts of the city were abandoned. Farmers refused to bring their harvests, fearing the city was cursed. Mothers told children not to speak the king's name, lest evil spirits be drawn to them. The once proud empire was becoming a ghost of itself. The strangest accounts came from slaves who managed to flee. They claimed the king spoke of visions, rivers of fire flowing through the streets, winged creatures circling the palace, and endless hands reaching up from the earth to drag him below. Some thought these were signs of madness, but others believed the gods had truly shown him the fate awaiting Babylon. Archaeologists studying these tablets were struck by the precision of the writing. These were not random tales but careful records, written by men who risked their lives to preserve the truth. Each stroke of the stylus carried both fear and duty. They knew Babylon's glory would fade, but they wanted future generations to remember why. The fourth fragment ended with a chilling image, the palace doors sealed, the king inside, and the city outside falling into ruin. Priests prayed for deliverance. Soldiers waited for orders that never came, and the people whispered of the inevitable. Babylon's king, once celebrated as a hero, had become its greatest curse. The final tablets described the collapse with haunting detail. It was said that one night, thunder rolled across the skies without rain, and the ground shook beneath the palace. Cracks split the walls, and statues toppled in temples. To the people, this was the gods' judgment the moment Babylon could no longer endure its king's sins. Inside the palace, the king wandered alone through his vast halls. His once bright robes hung in tatters, his crown forgotten on the floor. He spoke aloud to the empty corridors, pleading with unseen forces to forgive him. Slaves who survived later whispered that he clutched a torch and muttered prayers to both gods and demons, unable to tell them apart. One account claimed that in his final hours, he entered the hidden chambers. Below the palace, the same rooms where screams had echoed for years. What he sought there remains unknown, but fragments suggested he attempted one last ritual. The writing described blood smeared on stone walls, symbols scratched in haste, and the sound of chanting that ended in sudden silence. When dawn came, the palace gates remained closed. No guard answered, no servant emerged. The city outside fell into chaos. Some tried to storm the palace, but when they broke through, they found only empty halls. The king was gone, his throne sat abandoned, the torches burned out, and the air was heavy with the stench of smoke and decay. The archaeologists who pieced together this tale in 2018 noted that the last tablet ended with a single line: "The king walked into darkness, and Babylon wept." No further explanation was given. Whether he died in those hidden chambers, was taken by enemies, or was swallowed by his own madness, history remains silent. And yet, even after thousands of years, the story of this ruler echoes with power. It is not only the tale of one man's fall but a warning. Power without restraint becomes corruption, desire without limit becomes ruin, and a king who forgets his people will, in time, be forgotten himself, his name erased, his glory turned to dust, and his kingdom remembered only as a shadow of what once was.